Hello, my name is Drita Simons and I am the Director of the Chesapeake Mosquito Control Commission. This training session was developed in April 2016 for the Virginia Mosquito Control Association and the Governor's Zika Task Force. The presentation will take about 30 to 35 minutes. It has been designed as an instructional tool to teach public and private mosquito control agencies the best integrated pest management techniques for controlling mosquitoes that transmit Zika virus. The focus of this presentation is not so much on Zika virus and its impact on humans, but rather on control strategies for the mosquitoes that transmit it. However, we will cover a little background on the disease itself to emphasize its importance, especially in North and South America. The virus is spread primarily through the bite of infected mosquitoes. The symptoms really aren't all that serious. They are only present in about 20% of infected adults, and they last from 2 to 7 days. They include fever, rash, joint pain, and conjunctivitis. Conjunctivitis is the symptom that characterizes Zika virus and distinguishes it from other mosquito-borne viruses such as chikungunya. Infection of pregnant women has been linked to newborns with microcephaly, a condition characterized by a smaller than normal head, neurological problems, and sometimes blindness. Guillain-Barré syndrome is a rare syndrome which is also associated with the infection in adults. There is a lot of detailed information on Zika virus at many websites. The best are probably the Centers for Disease Control, the World Health Organization, and our own Virginia Department of Health. There are basic differences between how most endemic or well-established mosquito-borne viruses grow and spread, and how Zika virus propagates. Let's look first at West Nile virus, a well-established mosquito-borne disease in Virginia. The cycle begins with an infected mosquito of a particular species. This mosquito will seek a blood meal in the spring, and she will bite a bird. She will infect this bird with the virus when she bites it. The virus grows in the bird's body until it reaches a certain level or viremia. When another mosquito bites this bird, she will pick up the virus. It takes a couple of weeks for this mosquito to develop her eggs and lay her eggs, and during this time the virus is also growing in her body and migrating to her salivary glands. She will then seek another blood meal from an uninfected bird sometimes, infect that bird, and the cycle continues. This cycle will continue throughout the summer, and we call this process amplification, where the activity of the virus and the level of virus in the environment becomes greater and greater. At some point, one of these infected mosquitoes may bite a horse or a human. We call horses and humans dead-end hosts, not necessarily because the virus kills the horse or the human, but because it can't reach a high enough level in their bodies for another mosquito to pick it up and spread it. So this is a bad thing for the virus. It's basically a dead end. Zika virus is a little bit different. It does start in an infected mosquito, just as the other cycle is, but of a different species. The difference is that when this mosquito prefers humans, and so when this mosquito bites a human, that human gets Zika virus. The virus grows, the viremia increases, just as it did in the West Nile virus cycle, until another mosquito bites that human, picks up the virus. It multiplies in her body just like it did in West Nile virus, but she will, after she lays her eggs and is seeking another blood meal, she will bite another human and infect that human, and the cycle continues. So the big difference between these two viruses is that the host of the virus in Zika virus is humans, whereas the host of the West Nile virus cycle is birds. And that's very important when you talk about the risk of a virus propagating and being a risk to humans. As of this recording, Zika virus is not yet endemic in the state of Virginia. There's been no local transmission by mosquitoes here. The question is, will it become a problem in Virginia? And the honest answer is that we don't yet know. But there are several factors which will determine whether or not it becomes a problem. We need to ask certain questions. For example, is the climate warm and humid enough here for the virus to grow? Our moderate climate is quite different from the tropical climate where they have such trouble with Zika in South America. Will there be enough infected hosts or humans present for local mosquitoes to pick up the virus? Remember, the humans are an important link in the cycle that we just talked about, and if there aren't enough infected humans, the virus can't be locally transmitted. Will differences in living conditions hinder virus spread? For example, in the United States and in Virginia in particular, most of us have access, not all, but most have access to screens and air conditioning, and that will keep us physically away from the mosquitoes. Our human population is less dense, and we have fewer containers per residence in general. Down in South America, where this is such a problem, many people collect drinking water in cisterns that collect rainwater, and these are a big problem with breeding these particular mosquitoes. Will better media access and public education help us? And finally, will greater access to mosquito control operations help our case? You may have noticed that so far when I've discussed spreading mosquito-borne diseases, I've said that only certain species can spread certain diseases. There are about 58 mosquito species in the state of Virginia, and anywhere you happen to be, there are probably about 25 common species. Not all of these can transmit Zika virus. In fact, very few of them can. The top two species you see in this picture cannot transmit Zika virus, and this is very important when we talk about control of Zika vectors. There are actually only 2 known species of mosquitoes that are capable of transmitting Zika virus in North and South America. The species that has been responsible for the large outbreaks in South America and Central America is Aedes aegypti, or the yellow fever mosquito. This mosquito is uncommon in the state of Virginia. It is a container breeder. It only lays its eggs in containers that catch and hold rainwater, and it prefers to bite humans, which makes it really the perfect vector for this particular disease. Aedes albopictus, or the Asian tiger mosquito, is the other species that we know that can transmit Zika virus in North and South America. It is very common in the state of Virginia. It's a container breeder, and it also prefers to bite humans, but it's a little less discriminating. It will bite other things besides humans. Along with being a Zika vector, Aedes albopictus is also the most common backyard problem that we have in Virginia. It is present in almost all suburban and rural areas. It's quite small, especially when the weather is very hot and it's developing very quickly, and it is active during the day. This is very important. There is only one other mosquito in Virginia that looks very similar to this one, and that is probably the Aedes taeniorhynchus, or the salt marsh mosquito. This mosquito, however, is only coastal. It's present near salt and brackish marshes. It's not common throughout the whole state. It is usually a little larger than Asian tiger mosquitoes, and it's sometimes active during the day, but it's more active during the evening. Now, you may look at these mosquitoes and say they look very much alike. However, there are a couple of important differences. Even though both of these mosquitoes have stripes on their legs, the Asian tiger mosquitoes, the white stripes on her legs, are much broader and brighter, and they're very, very easy to spot. But the one distinguishing feature between these two mosquitoes is right here. The Asian tiger mosquito has a white stripe that extends from its head down behind its head. And this is a very distinctive feature with the Asian tiger mosquito. A small black mosquito with white stripes on its legs and a white stripe down the back of the head. Now, I've stated that the Asian tiger mosquito is probably our biggest backyard mosquito problem, and the question you may ask is why? Well, for one thing, they were first documented in Virginia, actually in Virginia Beach, in 1991, which really isn't all that long ago. This makes them an exotic species and they're very invasive. They spread like crazy. They're very aggressive biters and will attack during the day. This makes them a big problem. They're probably responsible for more service requests than any other species in Virginia. And finally, they're very difficult to control, and this will become apparent very soon. We need to talk a little bit about the Asian tiger mosquito life cycle. This cycle begins with an adult blood-fed female. This female will develop eggs and eventually lay them along the inside of a container. The eggs will dry and they actually are viable for a long time, for about 400 days. As it rains and the container fills to a certain level with water, the eggs will hatch and the immature mosquito or larva will emerge from the eggs. You'll notice in this picture that there are a lot of different sizes of larvae, and that is because the water has risen, flooded a few eggs that have hatched, risen some more, flooded a few more eggs. So they're all different ages basically. The larvae go through different stages or instars, actually 4 different instars, and eventually will molt one more time and turn into a mosquito pupa. The picture on the left is what you would see if you looked at the pupae from the side, but I thought it was important to show you what they look like from the top because they look very different from the larvae and they look different than what you see on the left. These pupae will actually tumble through the water if you disturb them, so lots of times they're called tumblers. After another short period of time, these pupae develop and they eventually emerge out of the water as an adult mosquito. The important fact here is that Asian tiger mosquitoes only lay their eggs in containers that catch and hold rainwater. You won't find them in a ditch, you won't find them in a marsh, nowhere on the ground, only in containers. And this is a very important factor when considering control of Asian tiger mosquitoes. That concludes the biology portion of this presentation, and now let's talk about some of the practical aspects of controlling Asian tiger mosquitoes. There are indications upon the initial service call that the complaint may be due to Asian tiger mosquito problems. First of all, customers often complain about mosquitoes biting during the day. "My kids can't even go outside to play" is a phrase that I've heard many times in my career in conjunction with Asian tiger mosquito problems. The customer may complain about little black mosquitoes. The complaint may be coming from a highly populated area and there are no other major sources of mosquito breeding or stagnant water close by. And finally, day and nighttime temperatures have been high for about a couple of weeks. Asian tigers do not become really active until the weather is very warm, so they're not generally a problem early in the mosquito season. They do require a very labor-intensive individual approach to mosquito control, and not everyone has the resources to make backyard inspections. So I want to state at this time that public mosquito control operations may need to engage community outreach volunteers, for example, the Medical Reserve Corps. These individuals may be able to help pass out literature and do backyard inspections. I'm going to go over the individual steps in a successful service visit kind of quickly here, and then we'll go into them in detail one by one. First of all, take note of the area as you're traveling to the site. If there is a marsh or another large breeding site nearby, the problem may be coming from there. Talk to the customer for information. When did the problem start? What time of day do the mosquitoes seem to be biting? And where in your yard do they seem to be the worst? These are 3 quick questions you can ask and get quite a bit of information from these 3 questions. Ask the customer to keep pets and children inside while you're there and at least 30 minutes after you leave. Note any adult mosquitoes that may be hovering around you or your customer. Asian tiger mosquitoes are very distinctive looking, as we've seen before, and very often you can identify them even on the fly. Thoroughly inspect the yard for breeding sites, ideally with a customer present. Get rid of what you can and educate the customer about tipping and tossing once a week. Collect or note any larvae that you find. This is perhaps the most important step in your service visit, and it involves no pesticides at all. What we're trying to do is get rid of the source. This is called source reduction, and it's an important part of integrated pest management. If adult Asian tiger mosquitoes are present, you can offer treatment and have them sign a property release form. Make appropriate treatment at the appropriate time and ask the customer to keep their pets and children out of the area until the treatment dries. Do not treat flowering plants. This may endanger pollinators such as honeybees, and it's very important. Make any additional recommendations and offer educational literature. And finally, you can visit neighbors if necessary and appropriate. Sometimes, especially for public mosquito control agencies, we need to knock on the neighbor's door and also offer them Asian tiger mosquito control. Let's look at step one, and that is to note off-site sources of mosquito breeding. As I said before, there are many different species of mosquitoes, and the problem may not be Asian tiger mosquitoes. You may have other issues. Other mosquitoes choose other breeding sites, and you may be able to spot something on your way that may be a source of problems. Or there may be something nearby where you have a lot of containers, maybe a dump or something like that, and the problem may be coming from another source other than the customer's property. If you possibly can, try to talk to the customer on site and collect information. No one knows their yard like the resident, and they can tell you where the problems are. For your safety as well as theirs, ask the resident to keep their children and pets clear of the area. If you need to treat something with a pesticide, they need to be out of the area for at least 30 minutes after you've treated, or until the pesticide is dried on the foliage. While you're talking to the customer or while you're doing your backyard inspection, note any adult mosquitoes that happen to be hovering around. There is distinctive behavior that's associated with Asian tiger mosquitoes. For example, they're most abundant in shady corners where there's shelter. They won't generally be out in the sun. They may not be immediately apparent. It may take a few minutes for them to sense you and come out for a blood meal. They are furtive. They rarely just fly up and land and bite you. They will hover, they will get behind you, etc. They often attack from behind. And if there are pets around, and you won't know this because the pets will be out of the yard, but your customer may say something about this. They will attack pets around the face. I've seen them bite dogs around their eyelids and around their lips especially. If you are not sure of what type of mosquito you found, collect at least 2 adults and deliver them to the nearest public mosquito control agency for assistance. The next step is the most important thing you can do during a service visit, and that is to inspect for breeding sites. Asian tiger mosquitoes have a specific egg-laying or oviposition behavior where they lay their eggs in the container in a line that is perpendicular to the surface of the water. The reason for that is as the rain falls and the container slowly fills, the eggs will hatch in batches, and there won't be as much competition for food for the larvae. So you very often will see a sample like this with larvae in it that have different sizes or instars of larvae. As you are inspecting the customer's yard, note any containers that can hold untreated water for over a week. It takes a little over a week for the Asian tigers to go from the egg stage to adult mosquitoes. So if any water can be dumped out, the larvae, the pupae, will dry up and die, and you will have eliminated a source of breeding also. Look for anything, and also it's nice if you can offer to dump things that are heavy for the resident sometimes they can't lift and dump things. So tip and toss anything that you can find. As I mentioned before, the eggs are viable for 400 days. So there are certain things in people's yards where they like to keep water, such as bird baths and the trays underneath potted plants. If you remind them about the eggs and ask them to please scrub or wipe the sides of these containers once a week before they refill them with water, that will also eliminate a lot of mosquito eggs. If a source of water cannot be eliminated or changed once a week, it can be treated with a larvicide, which will kill the mosquito larvae. BTI products or insect growth regulators are very safe alternatives for water that cannot be eliminated. I want to encourage you to be open-minded when you're looking for water, for standing water. Look in places like clogged rain gutters, corrugated downspout pipes. We often find mosquitoes breeding in these. Tires, of course, they always hold rainwater. And tarps. There's not a tarp out there that doesn't have a fold in it that will catch and hold rainwater and breed Asian tiger mosquitoes. Just because we don't consider it as a container doesn't mean that the mosquito won't lay her eggs in it. Education is key in controlling Asian tiger mosquitoes. So if you possibly can, engage the resident in your inspection. If you find larvae especially, show them what they look like, because most people have no idea what mosquito larvae look like and they don't know what they've been raising in their own yards. If you have found sufficient evidence of Asian tiger mosquito problems, you can offer the resident a treatment for adult mosquitoes, but always get some form of property release. This could be pen and paper or it could be electronic, but you want to protect yourself from litigation. Once the decision has been made to treat, the question is, what do you use to treat for Asian tiger mosquitoes? As far as in the water, there are a couple of larvicide active ingredients that are good for backyard treatments. One is BTI, which is a bacterial spore. It's very specific in that it only kills mosquito and blackfly larvae, so it's very safe for non-target organisms. Insect growth regulators are also very safe and very handy to use in backyards. As far as spraying for adult mosquitoes, there are two basic classes of pesticides that you might consider. The first ones are space sprays, and they basically kill mosquitoes that are on the fly upon immediate contact with the pesticide. There are several active ingredients you can look for, and these are some of them that are employed in mosquito control. There are also barrier treatments, which are more residual. They last longer, and they are sprayed on the foliage so that when mosquitoes land on them, it will impact them and it will kill them that way. And once again, there are several different types of barrier treatments, and what you choose depends upon your budget and your situation. For guidance as to what type of pesticide you can use, a good source of information is the American Mosquito Control Association. They have a website, and they have a lot of good information on pesticides for use for mosquito control. The next question is, how do you use particular pesticides? And the answer to this question is in a very obvious place. It is on the label. The label is the law. Make sure that you follow it. It's very important to apply the correct amount. For example, if you happen to underdose, you'll put out a sublethal amount of the pesticide and it will not eliminate the mosquitoes. It may result in development of resistance, especially with repeated treatments. If you overdose, you may be harming beneficial organisms. You would definitely be wasting insecticide and money. And finally, this may also result in development of resistance, especially with repeated treatments. So it's very important to apply the correct amount. The next question you need to ask yourself is where you need to direct this adulticide. You want to make the appropriate treatment. And this particular area is a perfect place for Asian tiger mosquitoes to rest. So this is the logical place where you would direct your adulticide, up under the foliage and in dark shady corners. Make sure that you use the appropriate personal protective gear and direct the pesticide into the bushes and into the heavy foliage where they may be resting. Of course, there is the question as to when the best time to treat is. The best time to treat for Asian tigers is not at dusk, but right before dusk, in the evening before the sun goes down. At that time, pollinators such as honeybees are not as active. Now, I realize that this is not practical for a lot of us. We can't wait until the evening. So the best thing to do is, if we have to treat during the day, then avoid any flowering plants at all. Some plants are going to be very obvious, like this one has a magenta flower. It's going to be easy to spot. However, there are a lot of plants and bushes out there that have kind of nondescript flowers. You don't see them easily. So you need to do a thorough inspection of the bushes in an area and avoid all flowering plants, even those that have small, indistinct flowers. Other important considerations when you're spraying property for adult mosquitoes. Always wear all required personal protective gear, and of course you find this information on the label. Use correctly calibrated application equipment. Once again, you can find this information on the label. Do not apply right before rain. You'll have runoff and you won't have any effect from your pesticides. And do not apply when it's windy, because drift will take the adulticides off site. As you're winding up your inspection and your insecticide treatment, hopefully the residents will be available and you can offer them educational literature on mosquito control measures that they can take. There are templates available for this literature on the Virginia Department of Health website, but if you choose to create your own literature, you might want to include the following information. Tip and toss containers once a week. Treat large containers with BTI, bacterial spore. Keep small pools and ponds stocked with fish that will consume larvae. Keep shrubs and undergrowth trimmed. If you're applying a barrier spray, trim your foliage before the treatment. Eliminate adult resting sites. Choose insecticides labeled for mosquitoes and flying insects. Read and follow the label. Direct the application in resting areas and always avoid all flowers. Finally, wear the 3 L's, long, loose, and light-colored clothing, and use insect repellent, but always follow label directions. This note is specifically for public mosquito control organizations, and it concerns the effectiveness of ground ultra-low volume truck sprays. These sprays do have some effect on Asian tiger mosquitoes, but it's limited, and so they should only be used in conjunction with backyard inspections and property sprays. For best results, turn the nozzle to 90 degrees. That directs the spray a little bit lower, and travel at 20 miles an hour. That will disperse the spray into the backyards. And finally, treat suburban areas just before and at dusk during the period of highest Asian tiger mosquito activity. If you have a whole route to do, start in the more suburban areas. As a final note, please remember that we as public servants and pesticide applicators have responsibilities to both public health and the environment. Let's act as professionally and trustworthy as possible. I hope that this training has been helpful, and I thank you very much.